rise as we receive the President and the family of Dr. Ginwala.
Academic, political leader, activist.
Standing, we shall have the anthem of South Africa as well as the anthem of the African Union. All of you for being with us this morning at this memorial service convened by His Excellency the President to honor by recognizing the family of Dr. Ginwala, His Excellency our President, President Ramaphosa, His Excellency our former President, President Mbeki, Premier Lessufi, Members of Parliament and leaders of parties represented in Parliament, Their Excellencies, Ambassadors and High Commissioners, we're most grateful. We will be sharing co-hosting of the program with my colleague, Honorable Nomantu Ralehoko, the MEC of Health of Gauteng, the Honorable Premier of the Gauteng Province, Mr. Panyaza Lessufi, to present welcome remarks. And can I remind everybody that I was a
Director, Mena Lady Panda, and MEC Nkomoralo, His Excellency our President, members of Cabinet, members of the provincial legislature and provincial government. In the interest of time, allow me to observe protocol. Today we are memorializing the life of one of the highest and most desirable ideals. For us to be free, others had to let go their freedom. For us to achieve our freedom, others had to forsake their time. Our path to freedom was led by men and women of great stature. Our path to freedom was paved by those who believed in a vision where South Africans will live together, black and white. Our people dearly. As we gather here today, we do so because we lost the lioness of our struggle. As we converge here, We do so because the one who was brave has left us. Without any inch of shame and regret, the name Comrade Frene Ginwala stands out like a glittering star but forever. Our Madam Speaker, where intelligence was required, when roughness was needed to restore sanity. A woman of formidable reins in the ranks of the African National Congress. With a glittering future in academic and law opened to her, she chose to serve our people and work full-time for the ANC in London when she took her first post to establish the list and an activist, but above all, a liberator. A role in our struggle, coupled with 30 years she spent in exile, is an affirmation that our struggle was once led by people of impeccable credentials. Half of the people of Gauteng, we let go of our province to you all, so that it can be used to honor this giant of our struggle, a peacemaker. On behalf of the people of Gauteng, we open up everything we possess for you to use it to serve, but definitely the foundation is solidly established. Together with you, we'll finish the task, but please find solace that she has not died, because the ideals to which she stood for, the ideals of non-racialism, a well democrat, feminist, and a true national hero. Go well, our Madam Speaker. I thank you.
That is what we are here to do today. Included among the tributes that will be paid to Dr. Ginwala today will be musical items, music she loved. Because she loved music, you may not know that side of her. She had a shop where it could be had. Indeed, as South Africans, we are so fortunate. In fact, so fortunate that often we don't recognize our fortune. We stand on the shoulders of so many giants. How are we going to put it to good effect? That is all that we must answer. We don't lack reach. It's just the ambition. So we have the musical item now. I don't know what was selected. The nephew of the late Dr. Ginwala, to present the obituary. Cyrus?
Thank you, Program Director. Good morning. Obituary of Dr. Frene Ginwala. Dr. Frene Ginwala was born on the 25th of April, 1932, in Johannesburg. Her parents were Naswan and Solly Ginwala. In the 1890s, her grandparents emigrated from India to Mozambique and later to South Africa. After completing a Bachelor of Laws degree from King's College, University of London in the 1950s, she was admitted as a barrister at the Inner Temple in England. In 1974, she was on the topic Class, Consciousness and Control, Indian South Africans, 1860 to 1946. Dr. Ginwala had a multifaceted career spanning political activism. As a lifelong member of the African National Congress, ANC, she served in various structures, including the National Executive Committee, NEC, the NEC Subcommittee on Governance and Legislature. At the request of Mr. Walter Sisulu, she left South Africa in 1960 to facilitate the escape of Mr. O.R. Tambo to Mozambique. Together with Mr. Tambo, Dr. Ginwala helped to establish the external mission ANC President Tambo and was renowned for her research on South Africa's nuclear program, economic sanctions, and the arms and oil embargoes in particular. She lectured at various universities by the United Nations and other organizations to deal with issues related to conflict research, women, development, and technology transfer. She served as the ANC spokesperson in the United Kingdom in the early 1970s. President Julius Nyerere asked her to establish and edit the Standard newspaper. After more than 30 years in exile, Dr. Ginwala returned to South Africa in 1990. She joined the in 1994. She served as the deputy head of the ANC Commission for the Emancipation of Women and was the ANC representative on the Science and Technology Initiative. As a committed constitutionalist, she played elections held in South Africa in 1994. She served as a member of the technical committee responsible for drafting new laws on the elections and the Independent Electoral Commission. National Assembly in a democratic South Africa. She of the Republic of South Africa of 1996, systems and rules as equal citizens. As the first Speaker of the National Assembly, Dr. Ginwala championed new initiatives, including the Perspectives on and of Africa project, which focused, among others. She took great satisfaction from locating the oldest known map of Africa from China, made in 1389, titled Deming Hunya Tu. A copy of that map was presented to Parliament to advance gender equality and advocated the active participation of women in the mainstream economy. She also organized scholarships for destitute youth. She was a founder member and the first national convener of the women's religious spheres to ensure their participation in the making of the Constitution and in the formulation of the Women's Charter that was launched in 1994. Dr. Ginwala later led the South African parliamentary delegation to the Beijing Women's Conference, included serving as a board member of the International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance, as chairperson of the Southern African Development Community Parliamentary Forum, as co-chairperson of the Global Coalition for Africa Development, the International Commission on Human Security, and the Advisory Board on Corruption established under the African Union Convention on Preventing and Combating Corruption. In South Africa, Dr. Ginwala chaired the presidential inquiry into the fitness of the then National Director of Public Prosecutions, Advocate Busi Pikoli, to hold office. In 2007, member of the Council for the Advancement of the South African Constitution in 2010, and also served on the Oliver and Adelaide Tambo Foundation, Nelson Mandela Foundation, and Freedom Park Trust, respectively. Of the Thuli in silver for, and I quote, her excellent contribution to the struggle against gender oppression and her tireless contribution to the struggle for a non-sexist, non-racial, just and democratic society. Activities. She received numerous local and international awards and honorary degrees. These included the Honorary Doctor of Law degree by the University of the Witwatersrand in 2022, of the Rising Sun by the Emperor of Japan in 2008, the North-South Prize by the North-South Center of the Council of Europe in 2003, the Honorary Doctor Technologiae by the then Port Elizabeth Tech Law degree by the University of Connecticut, USA, 2002, the Global Award for Outstanding Contribution for Promotion of Human Rights and Democracy by the Priyadarshini Academy, India, in the year 2000, the Grand Officier de l'Ordre National of Ivory Coast, Côte d'Ivoire, in 1998, the Honorary Doctor of Law degree by the University of Cape Town in 1997. Dr. Ginwala passed away on the 12th of January 2023 at the age of 9, Rustamji and their families. May her...
You can dance for Frene if you wish. This is a celebration. Thank you very much, Cyrus. An illustrious career indeed. As the program director, I shall direct the... I recall we were chairing one meeting together, and there was a gentleman in the meeting who referred to himself as Professor so-and-so. And he was making rather unprofessor-like. Why do you call yourself professor? You're actually not a professor. And imagine our laughter when the gentleman turned to Dr. Ginwala and said, well, you call yourself doctor, but you're not a doctor. Not understanding that you can attain a PhD. Allowed by former Minister of Transport in President Mandela's government, Mr. Mac Maharaj. So if Ambassador could come up, and then former Minister Mac Maharaj will follow.
In the extraordinary life of our comrade, Dr. Frene Ginwala, Noshir Ginwala, our own, one of our newspapers, on radio, on television, all commenting on the illustrious career and life of Dr. Frene Ginwala. Frene to all of us, and she never demanded to be called by any titles. Frene was a freedom whom she served through her movement, the African National Congress, places her in the pantheon of a cohort of leaders who have left us a legacy which we must protect. A legacy which we have to preserve. A legacy seems to be in danger of being shattered. Her life of service stretched from her youth till she passed away, people of South Africa. Frene, as you all know, was a feminist of a high caliber who ensured that justice and equality for women was inserted into. She was an internationalist who helped to build the international later on. She traveled to every corner of the earth, claimed her for our own. She also belonged to the world. A scholar of the constitutional law who did not suffer fools and whose forthrightness, a thinker who did not tolerate fluff. She was a sophisticated woman who was always well-groomed and remarkably elegant at all occasions. She was an eloquent, she was much, much more than all of the things I have mentioned. I met Frene the first time in London, but she was such a strict person and almost aloof at times, and I might know everything. And if you did something, if you worked with her and you did something right, she was very sparing in her praise. And she would praise you and say, that was very good. However, then but when we worked in Mr. Nelson Mandela's office, Comrade Mandela, when we asked Frene to join us, we were very wary because whereas Jesse and I Jesse was a researcher, and we made sure that nobody knew she was coming because we were afraid that some people would try to stop her joining the office of Mr. Mandela. But she proved to be such a treasure in the office. A meeting to review the week past and to plan for the week coming. And sometimes Mr. Mandela placed us in a very difficult position, asking us to tell him the truth about how we felt or some decision he had to make. And if somebody said, no, I agree with Barbara, or he said, no, I want to know what you think. What do you think? Because sometimes if Frene was the first one to speak, purposeless to say anything more. But she could also be very playful and in rare moments. But I was watching a video of when he got stranded in his outing, in his private outing, and then had to call the office and ask us for money to come and save him because he had no money to pay the taxi that brought him back to the office. And this happened on several occasions. It was just a wonderful thing seeing the amusement and complete relaxed laugh that Frene had when these events happened. example to emulate in the life of Frene Ginwala. She has achieved so much, and she has left us this brilliantly a light in the darkness of history. That she was reading a book called The Trial of Cecil Rhodes. You must read it, and you must come back and we must discuss it. And I must say that one of the proudest things for me was that on her table in her living room, she had all the books that she had read recently. And she loved my book because I never got into the discussion because I'm sure I would have had a lot of howevers. We love Frene, and we must endeavor to emulate her. Hard arguments we had when we worked with her, and I think that was true in every sphere that she participated in. But one thing I can say with confidence that I can shout out on top: life in politics to the very end. Whether we agreed with her or not, she was a woman of high integrity. Thank you.
Society, members of Comrade Frene's family, I am humbled and honored to be given this opportunity to pay tribute to Comrade Frene Ginwala. Comrade Frene was endowed with many talents which led her to serve as a powerful our constitutional democracy. She cut her teeth in the turbulent times that arose in the wake of the Sharpeville massacre and the banning of the ANC and the PAC in 1961. It was a time when the liberation movement was forced that were about to throw off the yoke of colonialism and grapple with finding pathways to lift their people out of poverty and misery. They were searching for ways forward in a world driven by the Cold War, the Sino-Soviet controversy, and a world in which the non-aligned movement was born, the person that he was. I shall therefore dwell on a few events that shaped Comrade Frene into a resilient and resolute freedom fighter. Few comrades know of the contribution that Comrade Frene made with regards to the action on the record. In 1979, Comrade Frene handed me a bulky lever arch file which contained the layout of the mobile refinery in Durban. I passed the file to Comrade Slovo, who at that time was President Tambo. The file provided us with in-depth information on the functioning of an oil refinery, its layout, and its vulnerable points, attacking the refinery as well as the international campaign to impose oil sanctions against apartheid. Comrade Ismail Abu Bakr of the refinery, he reported back that if the fractionating towers were hit, the resulting vapor cloud explosion could destroy the entire surrounding area, and that would endanger the lives and health of the local residents at the University of Natal Medical School. Special Ops therefore decided not to proceed with the attack on that refinery. However, they used that information about the mobile refinery in order to plan and successfully attack Sasol 1 and Sasol 2, also involved in doing preliminary planning against the power stations and the power network in South Africa. Comrades under her guidance provided Special Ops with detailed maps plotting the location of the pylon network, which was used to good effect by Special Operations. And this enabled her to provide the means for many of our leaders to find their way to safety in Dar es Salaam in the early 60s, where the ANC was able to establish its offices, regroup, and reorganize itself. In Mozambique, in liberated Mozambique, she provided the salam. She edited a newspaper called The Spearhead. She served on the editorial board of the Algeria-based journal Révolution Africaine and worked as a stringer for the Guardian newspaper in London. At the time when newly independent Tanganyika was grappling with the role of the media in the conflict, brought her into collision course with the government led by President Nyerere. And in 1963, she was deported. 7 years later, the government of Tanganyika, revoked the deportation order and invited her back to Tanzania. And on the 5th, a foreign-owned newspaper, The Standard, and that he had appointed Comrade Frene as its managing editor. He also announced that in that job, Comrade Frene would be directly responsible to the President and the President alone. But in running a government-owned newspaper, it was destined to generate controversies, both within the staff at the Standard and within the public arena. One of the expatriate journalists who worked with Comrade Frene at that time described her, and I'll quote him, as a pinless hand grenade in the President of Sudan for the violent purge of members of the Sudanese Communist Party. This stance clashed with the Tanzanian government's drive to build a campaign against the regime of Idi Amin in Uganda. Nemeri was one of the few African lists and ordered out of Tanzania. I relate these incidents to remind us of the difficult circumstances in which the ANC was operating and the turbulent times in which Frene forged her steely resolve to search for the truth and victim. In September 2007, our government suspended Advocate Vusi Pukoli from his position as the National Director of Public Prosecutions and appointed a commission of inquiry, was meticulous in the conduct of the inquiry and ensured that there was maximum transparency. And she found against the government and ruled that Advocate Pukoli was fit out her deep commitment to truth and social justice. She followed a simple rule that what was in the country's interest would be in the interest of the ANC, because the ANC has fashioned 3 incidents taken together, bring out not only her indomitable spirit, but also tell us of Frene, an authentic freedom fighter forged in the furnace of struggle. Hambagase, Comrade Frene, may your legacy inspire Freedom Charter and in the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, which was signed into as being our foundational law at Sharpeville by Nelson Mandela on the 10th of December, 1996. Hambagase, Comrade Frene.
Thank you very much to Comrade Mac Maharaj, an indomitable woman indeed. I believe we should reflect as well on the international contribution that Comrade Frene made including leading the Parliamentary Union, the SADC Parliamentary Forum, the Global Coalition for Africa in various periods, and the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association branch in South Africa. She was also, and I remember she loved, on African development, and she served as a commissioner of the International Commission on Human Security, a report that she presented in 2000 outlining how we need to pay attention to the full flood of economic development. Some may recall the very important role she played in partnership with Minister Dlamini Zuma in crafting the protocol on the Pan-African Parliament. I remember watching this duo confront President Gaddafi and insist on. I now invite tributes from the following, and I shall retire from the program directing and hand over to MEC Nkomo Ralihoko after this. I invite Ms. Pregs Govender, a human rights, the floor, followed by the former Speaker of the National Assembly, Comrade Baleka Mbete, who was a very close friend, colleague, and comrade of Frene Ginwala, and a member of the Pan-African Parliament, Ms. Pemi Majodina, who is currently Chief Whip of the Majority Party in the National Assembly. So in that order, if I could ask that the speakers proceed. Is Pregs here?
Thank you. Frene was very clear about timekeeping. So I made my way up here before I was called. 28-year-old who joined the fight for freedom and helped ensure the safe passage of ANC leaders like Comrade O.R. Tambo. In exile, you refused to be subordinate secretary, taking notes while men spoke. Instead, you addressed not just class and race, but gender oppression, and committed to both non-racism and non-sexism. You analyzed the world and acted to change its injustice. You were an internationalist, standing. The greatest tribute, and you would have said so. You would want us to focus on the apartheid state's spatial geography that still traps millions in brutal poverty. It is no wonder, if we want to understand why and who is most vulnerable to gender-based violence, look at the street, long distances for water. Understand misogyny in public policy. That is what Frene would have wanted us, would have demanded that we do. After 1994, you presided over a secular. We used the silence to make us understand how precious words are and how real speech is in its impact on the way people live and die, unquote. In silence, our ability to think critically and creatively, and we can learn to trust each other. We can reconnect to the dignity inherent in every single one of us, recognized by our Constitution in its as its first founding value, alongside the visionary who convened the Women's National Coalition in early 1992. In response to South Africa's male-dominated transition, you united 90 national organizations and hundreds of local organizations and regional coalitions across party, and was to help the coalition conceptualize and manage in 1 year a massive participatory research campaign you dubbed Big Ears. The coalition went to rural areas, supporting women in forming regional coalitions and supporting the rural women's protest at Codesa, as well as the coalition conservative parties argued against gender equality. An estimated 2 million women participated and contributed to the coalition's campaign. Our shared commitment, despite the differences we argued about, and there were a few of those, charter demands are reflected in South Africa's final constitution and guided the work of Parliament's Committee on Women. You are a historian, Frene, who worked to record the role and relevance to the present of Black women's powerful challenges, and Massey, entitled Gender and Economic Policy, should be read by every economist, especially our policy experts, and anyone who wishes to understand the structural causes of gender oppression that increase poverty, precarious employment, a democracy that ensured substantive equality, justice, democracy, and freedom. After your passing, I listened to a recording of a 2018 conversation the two of us had about Parliament's book series of personal reflections on the constitution-making process, class, race, and gender inequality. You are proud of what Parliament achieved, especially the work of Parliament's Committee on Women that you'd initiated and that I'd chaired, that held hearings with rural women and ensured Parliament enacted 80% of women's legislative priorities. About the women's budget that the Finance Committee's Working Group on Gender and Macroeconomics initiated with NGOs. In an international speakers forum and many other spaces, you boasted about the use of the first budget debates to propose the women's budget, helping lead many others on gear, the arms deal, and HIV and AIDS that preceded my resignation were not easy. The ANC whip, whose instruction I ignored not to mention addressed my farewell event held in a dining hall outside the National Assembly in your capacity as Speaker of Parliament. I felt your respect, your love, our shared commitment. The same fortnight, Petu Siroti and Myrtle Witboy are dancing, laughing, and celebrating your collective love, courage, and insubordination that you all taught me. Today, I wear a sari to honor you, Frene, to foster narrow, parochial ethnicities and nationalisms, racism, misogyny, and xenophobia that fascist leaders and states across the world continue to do today, pitting people against each other instead of addressing the root causes of increasing inequality, poverty, and all-white Parliament stepped into the most powerful position in the House, wearing a sari, reclaiming culture as celebratory as liberatory. In that speaker's chair, you sat solid above me as I shared the country report we'd edited for Beijing to re-include drafters of the initial Beijing draft, for gender-responsive budgets, for abortion, against gender-based violence, for counting and valuing women's unpaid, unrecognized contribution to society. I felt you beaming quietly your support, as I feel it now, to work across generational and other difference towards the world of our dreams. Thank you.
Malibongwe. Igama likaMama Frene Ginwala, Malibongwe. Amanda. Thank you, Comrade Chair, Comrade Naledi, and may I recognize the family of Comrade Ginwala, the Ginwalas and the Rastomjis, and other close friends and family who are here. I also recognize her family, the African National Congress, whose president leads the leaders who are here today, and the cadres, and Amakhosikazi who are here, who have led us in song. In celebration of a life well lived. Comrade Frene Ginwala's trailblazing contribution to the new dispensation in South Africa can only be compared to that of another founder, legacy of being a founder towards the establishment of the AME Church of South Africa. She established schools. She mobilized women across racial lines. She was one of the founders of the African National Congress itself, having actually participated in the Vaihu Church on January the 8th, 1912. Charlotte was a leading intellectual of her time, raising critical matters relating especially to the realities of traditional communities and women within them. Her value was respected even by Ubukhosi in this respect, where she was called upon to the royal house, Yabatembu, as an advisor who was respected. Charlotte became a respected voice, uncompromising in engaging the authorities of different levels in different decades. I would even boldly suggest that her example is what inspired the 1956 activism that led to the march to the Union buildings, although she had been gone for a decade and a half already. As the Archives Subcommittee of the African National Congress of the NEC, the outgoing NEC that handed over to the December conference, we have put it on record in our end-of-term report of 2022 that we marked the 90th birthday of Dr. Frene Ginwala. This is the comrade who must be credited for the attention and the work towards the preservation of the archives of the struggle for our liberation. And I must express my gratitude here and my honor to Comrade Barbara Masekela for the role she played in her consultation and discussion with President Mandela that led to them arranging for Comrade Frene being relocated from London at the time to join the Secretariat, as she has told us this morning. Because had it not been for them doing that, we don't know that Comrade Frene would have been able to join us because of the attitudes and the things that do happen within the spaces in our interactions, in our daily dynamics, in the struggle and the movement in particular. Attention to President Ramaphosa's October 22 bilateral agreement between the University of Fort Hare and the ANC, whose main focus was in the addendum that the Archives Committee had pursued because of work that Frene had done 30 years before in her being the main advisor and being the supporter as the main researcher, whose groundwork and whose record, and in fact, who was credited already in the era of President Oliver Tambo's times with the solid work that Comrade Mac Maharaj told us about today. And that's why they were able to recognize that the fact that she was needed to lead the research aspect of the work in the secretariat of Comrade Nelson Mandela in those founding days. And therefore, in that capacity, Comrade Frene had done that earlier work to which the addendum that Comrade President Ramaphosa went and signed in October 2022. An addendum which was upgrading the earlier agreement that had been signed by President Mandela and Professor Bengu at the time, who was representing Fort Hare, and was now including the area of technology, because in these days we are talking 4IR, we're talking about digitization, and therefore it's an era whereby, whereas 30 years before, the archives were paper archives, we are now talking about digitization of the archives, in fact, not only of the ANC, but of the struggle broadly. As I say, in that regard, in 1992, signed the first agreement between the African National Congress and the University of Fort Hare, after which the University of Fort Hare has since established a National Heritage and Cultural Studies Center, which in fact is now hosting all archives of the liberation struggle of the ANC, but also of all other organizations that participated in the struggle, including the PAC, the AZAPO, the BCM, and other organizations, perhaps where leaders have archives of individual roles that they played as participants in those formations that are outside of the African National Congress. I must hasten to point out that the leadership of the generation of President Mandela had quietly led the consultations with all the other parties in their time already, in order for all of them to agree to the idea of the need for the records to all be taken to Fort Hare, to the University of Fort Hare, as itself a critical player in the history of South Africa in decades gone by. A history which, in fact, was marked when it finished its own centenary a little while ago. Through the NEC subcommittee and Frene's careful forward-looking planning, she ensured that archivists were sent for training, some of whom today are at the Nelson Mandela Foundation, doing this valuable work. She told me when we were interacting with her in this past year around the issues of her birthday celebration, that she had taken her own personal papers to the Nelson Mandela Foundation, where she knows that some of these people that she had seen to the training of we're now working and we're going to be looking meticulously after the documents that had been generated in her own work. She had also brought back to HQ ANC head office to the archives unit headed by the manager, Comrade Zolile Mvunelo, whom she left there. She took boxes of what documents she thought properly belonged to the ANC. So Comrade Frene was a very organized person, very, very meticulous about what is done, how you plan ahead to make sure that there's no confusion ahead of time, and rather than just leave things to chance and hope that somebody is going to find a way of sorting things out. So she also had asked me and told me recently about the book about the trial of Cecil John Rhodes, because she also had ideas about, together with other researchers that she continued contact with, how to relate the approach in the trials of Cecil John Rhodes to our South African historical reality and perhaps learn from that. In the 3 occasions we spent time with Frene last year, including the beautiful celebration of her birthday, regrettably, it was not possible to give her a proper briefing on the latest developments relating to the work she started so meticulously as the first chair of the Archives Committee. Suffice it to say, to summarize it this way, the work of the Archives Subcommittee had subsequently led to the formation of what is now a non-partisan body, which is a collaboration of those who participated in the liberation struggle, whose archives are at Fort Hare. The legal framework to ensure proper guidance of this work is under consideration and is at initial stages of discussion. And we are hoping that with the involvement of the legal unit of the ANC at headquarters, there's going to be more clarity on what best to be done in this regard. In the speech of the University of Fort Hare Vice-Chancellor Buhlungu on the occasion of the October signing ceremony with the President of the ANC